Okay, so we're live. Hello, John. I'm Kate Howe. I'm the founder of Postcards for Parents.
And I'm John Stewart. I'm clinical director for Postcards for Parents. And it's always good to see you, Kate. Look forward to our discussion today.
Yeah, great to see you today. So today we have a topic which maybe is not always first of mind when parents are thinking about parenting questions or kind of what's pressing, but it's really important for the development of children, both the kind of concrete cognitive development and the larger development of their sense of self and their experience of the world. So basically, we're talking about the process of questioning, how, what happens when kids kind of get into the really kind of meaty, big questions of life, and how that can lead to an experience of awe, and how that dovetails with spirituality and the development of a spiritual self. So if we're just to kind of start at the beginning, just, kids are famous for asking so many questions, especially toddlers. Why this? Why that? Why is the sky blue? Why do I have to put on my shoes? So why do they do that? I'll ask my own question. Why do they ask so many questions, John?
Okay, well, because they want to know, Kate. And why they want to know. I mean, I think that what children are always involved in, I guess we as adults were involved in it, is we're trying to create models of understanding, schemas, ways that provide us kind of a cognitive perception of how the world operates, which allows it then can inform our decision making, can allow us to be able to kind of predict and make choices about behavior that hopefully are going to be adaptive and work out well. If we have good schemas and they accurately reflect the nature of reality, well, then we can use those to make life go well. And if our schemas are not so great, well, then it's going to create some problems. So I think it's the cognitive side, but it's not just cognitive, because there is a felt aspect to all of this as well. Because when a child is asking a question, they're wanting the information that you're providing in terms of kind of a cognitive model for it. But you can never pull that apart completely from the child's experience of you in answering it. Where do you go? What does it elicit from you in terms of your emotional response to whatever it is you're being asked about? And when we talk about the big questions, more existential-like questions, well, then that's very much true there. So what are kids looking for? They're looking to create a model, a cognitive model for how it is that the world works.
Well, that's so interesting. I mean, I never had heard it explained so succinctly before. And I guess also just to talk about the emotional side, when you have that mental model, the anxiety goes down, right? So that helps us operate, kind of know what to expect.
Absolutely. The unexpected, the only adaptive response to a world that's kind of governed by unpredictability, by the unknown, is to stay in a heightened state of readiness, and that we call that anxiety. We call that, and that we call that a body ready to fight, flee. It does not typically lend itself to a higher level kind of processing, understanding, and sorting through. So yeah, I mean, I think it's always the fact that in questioning, they're seeking to abate anxiety by having an accurate model.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so they develop this mental model, which we are always updating and adding to throughout life. And I'm sort of struck by how that kind of dovetails with the idea maybe of routines, and again, like knowing what to expect. So it's like just a way that you can help your child structure the world, I guess.
I think that, if we think about safety as being the first thing that we want to provide a child, if we're going to help them access the ability to develop all those various aspects of who they are, safety is dependent upon the child not experiencing the environment as always unpredictable. And so routines, and youngsters know that, well, when this happens, then this happens. So that it gives them a sense of competency. It gives them a sense that they know what to expect. It quiets their brains down and then actually allows them to do some upper brain development, as opposed to having all of their energy focused on survival.
So, first of all, why might parents kind of experience incessant questioning as sort of annoying or like, stop, and what's a good way to respond?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, sometimes we're just trying to get something done. It's a distraction. The incessant questioning of little ones can really it can pull us away from what we're trying to accomplish. And so I think that's one of the things. It's just a distraction. But I think if we understand it to be a very, very important kind of developmental task, we can manage that a little more gently. We can more easily say, hold on, sweetie, I just got to do this, and I'm going to come back. I want to answer your question. Giving kids the idea that their questions are good questions, seeing that we can take their question and kind of hold on to it and think about it. Oftentimes the questions are they're relatively complex. They may seem simple, but why does daddy go to work? Or why does my sister get to go to bed earlier than I do? Or it may seem like there's some ulterior motive in the questioning that, but I think that, what kids are really doing is looking for a way of understanding, and they're looking to see their parents as willing and able, to the extent that they are, to provide them some support, some structuring in answering some of these questions about how does this world around them work.
And is there a level of like abstraction that you recommend, like replying with, daddy goes to work because he has to pay the bills, versus like, well, we all have to contribute to the world, or that there's like different levels of like the concrete versus the kind of explaining the whole system?
I think absolutely. Kids at different stages are going to want and need different levels of sophistication, of abstraction, as you say. And I think that whenever there's an opportunity to kind of put the context of relationship into an understanding, I recommend that, because I think that there's no variable that's more complex to understand than human relationships, or more important for kids to understand. So why does daddy go to work? Well, daddy goes to work because he loves us, and he knows if he goes to work, they'll give him money, and that can pay for our house, and that can pay for our food. So that's why daddy goes to work. He goes to work to be able to have things to help take care of us. I think that if the youngster says, yeah, but why does he go to that job? Or what? Well, then you take it the next step. I think it's similar in talking to kids about sexuality. They'll let you know kind of how far they want to go. And when they start their eyes begin to glaze over, they're going further than they're ready or need to go. So I think that it's, there's always that need to kind of let them know that their questions are honored. It is how they're trying to figure things out, and that we want to be careful about being too annoyed by them. And we can be, because for all the reasons we've already mentioned, but just being distracted and incessant. And it can sometimes feel like attention seeking. It's a way to, and Rudolf Dreikers, he was a child psychologist from way back, and worked with Adler and such. And but he said the dilemma in parenting is largely to determine whether or not a child is seeking due attention or undue attention, and that most attention is due. Most attention kids need. They're seeking what they need. Now, every once in a while, maybe you come into something where you go, they're seeking something they don't need, and that I'm now getting kind of taken down, around the corner. But it's not a good place to start. So when a kid asks you a question, I think it's important to honor it as, it is genuinely something that they're wanting to develop an understanding for.
Yeah, so a couple of different points in there. One, just around, it's something that they're wanting to develop an understanding for. So my understanding there is that because their mind is open to it and they've asked, then they're like, never again will be so primed to absorb that information, right? We send them to school trying to put all this information in that they're not asking for, and they might not be ready for it. But when they're asking a question, like, don't miss that opportunity, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And you've got some kids who want, they want answers to more relational and, esoteric things. You've got some kids who say, where does the stuff in the toilet go? Where do they, and some of them will come back, they're like little engineers, and they come out, yeah, but what do they do with it? So I think sometimes our kids' questions can also be challenging because we're not real sure what makes sense. How do we frame a sewage treatment plant that then returns the water to your faucet? It's something that a youngster is going to be altogether comfortable with. I think there are things like that where you kind of have to sort through, all right, how much do they want to know? And different kids want to know greater or lesser amounts about a wide range of things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And also, about that seeking attention, it's sort of like if you are avoiding their questions because it feels annoying, then they're going to be kind of, they haven't been satisfied, right? So they're going to kind of keep seeking it. But if you stop, connect, etc., then it's more likely to kind of satisfy that desire for attention.
Well, and it also may shut down. You may even elicit a sense of shame in the child that they don't know and that they're seeking information. I think that we parents have, our kids' reactions to us they're diverse and they're pretty deep, and so. If we develop a story that, Joey's just constantly asking questions, that's all he ever does is ask questions. And Joey gets the sense that his asking questions is really something that's not very good about him. That's likely to create some dilemmas around question asking at a later point in life when he needs to be able to ask questions.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I also really liked the point about to try to bring in the relationships in your answers. Just say more about that.
Yeah, I think that, the most important set of variables for kids to master is the relational world. They're wholly dependent upon others to keep them alive. They don't have that capacity. They don't have, where if you were a baby horse in a couple of days, you'd be standing up and eating grass on your own. There'd be all kinds of, be less complicated. I guess you still need your mom for a while, but as most mammals do. But it's different. There is no part of the world that is really more complicated or essential than the relational world. So when kids ask questions like, why was grandma upset? And maybe grandma's upset because she and granddad had a fight, and we don't really want to go into that discussion. You're better off going into that discussion to the level that you need to. Well, granddad did something grandma didn't like. It didn't have anything to do with you. And so that's what that was. Because the other variable is that kids are so prone to see the world in this very egocentric way that has anything that goes on in a relationship around them is somehow the experience that is related back to them. So I think that, for all kinds of reasons, if somebody's happy, somebody's sad, somebody's confused, somebody's this or that, our best ability to give a child a relatively accurate explanation for what's going on is our beginning to teach them kind of emotional vocabulary, the idea that relationships can be understood. They're not just random. But I think kids who've grown up with a lot of chaos around them, relational chaos, they don't experience relationships as something that you can develop a scheme or a model to understand because there have been so many unpredictables. So I think we just want to be very conscious of the fact that when there's a relational component to it, you don't want to say, that's not your problem, that's not your business. Give a little quick synopsis that says, okay, all right, that's kind of a way to understand what's going on there.
Yeah, that totally makes sense as well. And I think when adults say, when they sort of gaslight and they say, daddy's not upset, or, nothing's wrong with me, or I'm not angry, that actually it's more confusing because you're obviously the child is picking up the signals and then you're telling them that their signals are wrong or their read of the signals is wrong.
And it makes them harder for them to learn how to label their own emotions. It may make them ashamed and feel like you're not supposed to acknowledge. Yeah, so all those things, Kate. Boy, we can split this up in a lot of different ways, can't we? The good news is we're pretty resilient, and we don't have to do it perfectly. We just have to. But the more conscious we can be of some of this stuff, the better.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would also say times when I try to kind of explain something that relational that's going on in a appropriate level for a child, it almost can simplify it for me in terms of, daddy's just stressed by a lot of stuff going on at work, or I had too many things on my plate, and then it maybe helps me too.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. Yeah. Yeah.
So if we're to then kind of move on to so those can be kind of very functional questions, but what happens when kids ask, what you might consider like big questions about life or death or the universe? What are those doing for kids?
Well, I think that one of the confounding variables here is people's religious belief systems, and I don't want to be. I certainly want to be respectful of different religious traditions and beliefs, but I think that from my perspective, that when you're asking the big questions for which there are not simple or clear or definitive answers, on some level you want to own that. On some level, you want to, how do you know there's God? Where does God live? Where does, questions like that. And, I think you give your best shot at it. You keep it as simple as possible. Or what happens, where did grandma go? She when grandma died, maybe grandma died when the little one was 2 and now they're 5. And they say, where did grandma go when she died? And then you gotta figure out, if you have a belief system that you are wanting to share with your kids, well, then you go to that in a way that's age appropriate. If you're not, well, then you go to some other kind of age appropriate. It might be that I don't know, sweetheart, but I know that wherever she went, it's exactly where she's supposed to go. But we don't have to be afraid, because that's how the universe works. It's the way it's supposed to be. And so something to that effect. You want to have some way of offering a response that doesn't confuse. It doesn't create, from my perspective, you want to be careful about creating a sense of absolute, but, people have different religious belief systems. I think I've quoted to you before, okay, one of my favorite perspectives on faith is from a guy named Paul Tillich. He was a theologian died in the late 60s. And he said the opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith is certainty. And so the idea being that whether the child wants to have faith that everything's going to be okay, whether the child wants to have faith that Jesus died for them, whatever it is that they want to have faith in, that when they're able to take it in a way so it's a felt sense rather than a thinking sense, because certainty is a thinking thing. Not knowing, that's more of what kids rely upon. They're more right hemisphere based, and so the more we're able to kind of provide them the opportunity to think, all right, this is probably how it is, but I don't know. You'll figure that out, or those you'll figure out what's true for you, sweetheart. Or so they're tough questions, and I hate to be so generic, but value systems, religious value systems, become such a central variable here that I want to be a little careful about that.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. So on the one hand, we're trying to answer questions in order to kind of help build mental models and schema. But then I also hear you saying, but to maybe an opposite extent, we're trying to build maybe some tolerance for ambiguity or like ability to be comfortable in not knowing, and then there's also this question of awe, which is like these big questions elicit awe, and part of that is really not knowing or just being in the presence of something that you can't understand. So talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I probably, awe. I think for adults and for little ones, and I think little ones actually live in awe more than we adults. I think we adults see things through a filter that kind of says, well, that can be explained. I understand that. We have these cognitive models that make us away from the wonder of what it is, just the spectacular nature of it. So little ones live in that a lot. And I think about awe as being just this sense of awareness of something so much bigger, so much beyond what you can understand. And in many ways, I think of awe as being connected with experiences of gratitude. And that moment where you see something and you're moved by its grandeur or by its remarkable qualities. And I think that I have a clearer sense of how it is that we try to amplify those moments when we touch awe or touch things for which we are grateful. Because I don't think that gratitude is something that you take and you hold on to it. You don't own it. You touch it. And then you have the practice of coming back and touching it more and more as often as you can. So I think about it like, let's say you take a child to the rim of the Grand Canyon, which I think is one of the most awe-inspiring places in the universe, or at least on our planet, I'll say. I don't know much about the universe, but on our planet. And because you're here and you don't see anything, the mountains, you see them miles and miles away, and you get up and there you go, oh, they're there. The canyon, you walk along and there's nothing there. And then you look down and you go, oh my God, the world has just dropped out on us. It's awe-inspiring. And I think that with children, when there is a moment, whether it is looking at a fly underneath a magnifying glass, the rim of the Grand Canyon, a newborn puppy, that encouraging them to take a second, just to stop, go, let's just stop. Let's just look at that and breathe for a second and just feel it. Because it's a felt sense. It isn't a cognitive sense that gratitude and I think awe come from. And I think that there's a Catholic brother whose name I'm blocking on. I can get it for you and we can list it. It has a wonderful YouTube presentation on gratitude, and his perspective is that it is something that's only experienced in a moment, and that what it takes is to stop for a moment, experience it, and then go on. Then you move on. You don't get to own it. You don't get to have, he talks about having lived in Africa where he had no modern facilities and such. And he came back to I think, the US, and he was just awestruck by, he could turn on hot water and he put Post-its next to a bunch of the things that he really just came back to remind himself to stop for a minute when he turns on the hot water and go, here it is. So I think that kids can help us do that. I think when you pull kids into that, it's a sweet thing. My dad was he was a character, and gratitude was one of his strengths. One of the things I remember so many times, we live on the waterfront here in Maine, and when he would come visit, if it was a pretty day, my dad he was 85, 90 years old. He'd walk out into the front yard and he'd look at that ocean, and he'd just stop for a minute and say, oh, what a day we've been given. And to be with him when he was doing that, there was no way to not touch it too. And I think so as parents, we can help our kids stop and feel awe and gratitude. Our kids can also help us do that if we let them. If we let them see a flower for the first time, see a bee, whatever it is, and just let them get us to stop for a moment and just be present and say, that's something, isn't it, buddy? A hummingbird. First time they see a hummingbird, it was like, oh my goodness. So I think our kids can be really useful in that regard to us, and we can be useful in that regard to them. The more we are able, I think, to show them that we honor awe, that we honor the need to take the moment for gratitude, I think the more we build that within them.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And so it's like, it is really not trying to answer anything right away, but just experience the question. I love that quote from Rilke about, just live the question now, and maybe at some point you'll live your way into the answer. I guess so. This is obvious, this is a personal thing, but after that moment of awe, what about kind of exploring how the hummingbird's wings work, or, entering more into that cognitive space to kind of learn about the world? Do you recommend that?
I think I absolutely think that if you have a youngster who is a young engineer in the making, and one of my grandkids is in that. Okay, how do they do that? Then we can go, all right, let's look at it. But I also think it's just fine to just leave it at that. If they're curious, or you could even ask, do you want to look at that? You want to see? And they may say no. That's just, I think kids, like adults, are wired in different ways with respect to some of that. Some walk to the Grand Canyon and are just in awe. Some walk to the Grand Canyon and want to study the geology of the region. It's ways of being.
And would you say, and we talked about how having a mental model kind of helps structure things and alleviate anxiety. Would you say that just also being present with the question can kind of have the same effect?
Absolutely. That absolutely, because I think there are two ways that we master the things that are more complicated. One is we develop some sort of cognitive model that helps us have some sense that we understand it, how it works. The other is the felt sense of someone else being with us with that. And that felt sense goes into your emotional memory and carries real power. So absolutely. I don't think you need to do both. I think that you're going to be led a little bit by some kids more towards it than others, towards both sides of it. And some of them just want the magic of it.
Interesting. I think that's a great place to end. Is there anything else that's come to mind that we should talk about for you?
I don't think so. We've talked about big questions, awe, gratitude. I think this is probably our most ethereal of topics so far, Kate.
It is, yeah. Well, maybe just one thing that we haven't talked about is, I know you've talked about kind of 4 or 5 dimensions of human experience, and this one being more in terms of the spiritual that we haven't talked about so much.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So I think it's appropriate. I think it's a huge part of who we are, and I think it's a part of who we are that we oftentimes, in more secular cultures in particular, we oftentimes are not great at knowing how to direct attention to that and how to walk beside and help a child in that realm.
True. And so then maybe these big questions get more directed toward the cognitive scientific answers, which might leave a hole in terms of the kind of relational and experiential feeling of it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's good observation.
Well, great. Thank you so much. This was fascinating as normal, and we'll be back next week.
Yeah, all right, Kate. Thank you. It was fun. Bye-bye.
Thanks, John. Talk to you soon.